Welcome back to another episode of Right Here in Mass. Joining me today is Nancy Traversy, who's the co-founder of Barefoot Books, which she started in 1992 when her eldest daughter was 3 weeks old. Barefoot Books is an independent publisher committed to creating beautiful books that celebrate the formative role of art and storytelling in children's lives. Nancy, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. Your full bio, which is very extensive and impressive, is listed in our show notes for our listeners to click through and read about you from there. But I would love to give you the opportunity just to share with our audience who you are and what you do.
Right. Well, yes, I'm Nancy Traversy, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Barefoot Books, and we are a children's publisher. And as you said, we started in a long time ago in 1992, back in London, England, is where I started the business. But I'm now living in Concord, Massachusetts. I moved here in 2001. But originally a Canadian, still Canadian, still a proud Canadian, but have been living here in the States in Concord since for about 22 years, 23 years.
Wonderful. And what was it that inspired you or influenced you to start Barefoot Books? Like, what was your career journey like leading up to that point?
So I grew up in a family who were all quite artistic. My mother was a painter, my sister is a designer and an illustrator, and I was a bit of the black sheep that I went to business school. And ended up, I was working with Price Waterhouse, which it used to be called way back then, which I'm still saying what my age is. It's now PwC. And I was working with them. And at the time, I was in my early 20s and I wanted to see the world. And I had this idea that if I worked for a multinational company, I could spend a couple of years in London, a couple of years in Singapore, a couple of years in Sydney, and move around the world. And so I got them to transfer me from Toronto, where I was living, to London, and got sent home from work in 1985 for wearing trousers, which women didn't do back then. And so that was the end of my career with Price Waterhouse, and spent some time in a couple of small entrepreneurial design companies. We designed everything from Sony Walkmans to Samsonite luggage and Virgin Atlantic Airline seating. And so I kind of learned the ropes of small entrepreneurial creative agencies and did a lot of traveling in Asia, because of we were product designers, so looking for manufacturers, and enjoyed it. I learned a lot. Learned not only the sort of financial side. I got to put in new computer systems back then when nobody had computer systems. Again, I'm showing my age. And then I decided when I was married and pregnant with my eldest daughter that I would not want to spend my whole life in the design industry. So I started a little creative business, a consultancy business, helping creative companies get off the ground. And that's when I met my co-founder, Tessa Strickland. She had been in adult publishing at Penguin and Random House. She had three little kids. They were aged 2, 4, and 6. And by this time I had my 3-week-old baby daughter. Or I was about to have her, and she came and said she wanted to start a children's publishing business that was multicultural, and used children wonderful stories and art and music from all over the world. And I had entrepreneurial background and very interested in the art and the design side. And she had the business side, and she had the sort of words side from her editorial experience. So we decided to start Barefoot Books, and we went out to friends of friends to raise money to get the business off the ground. And we launched our first list in September 1993, so sort of a year and a bit later after we started the company.
What a wonderful story. And I think it's also really unique and strategic that you and your co-founder Tessa had come together and really been able to ultimately marry the two strengths that you had, or the multiple strengths that you had, with she and her expertise in the adult publishing, and you, as you mentioned, with the creative and design and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's the perfect combination, it sounds like, for being able to start Barefoot Books.
Yeah, no, it was at the time I didn't know a lot about publishing, and I think perhaps that set us in good stead because I didn't necessarily always play by the rules. Um, and so we started, we raised more money than we set out to, and we launched our first list with, I think it was eight or 10 titles in 1993. But the goal, the vision was always we had wanted to raise our children to be open-minded and open-hearted global citizens. And so we started out by trying to find really wonderful myths and legends and fairy tales and folk tales from all over the world, and amazing illustrators from those cultures and countries, and really create the most beautiful books that we possibly could.
Absolutely. And with that, was going into the publishing industry something that was totally unexpected for you, or did you think that that potentially could have been something that you saw yourself getting into in your future? Like ultimately, was it something that you didn't necessarily see yourself ever going into and it just kind of happened, or something you've been interested in?
No, I mean, I loved to read as a lot as a child, excuse me. And but I certainly, when I left Toronto as a 24-year-old, had no idea what my future was. And it was sort of serendipitous, I think, that what I love about publishing and why I'm still doing it nearly 33 years later is because you get to work with these amazingly talented people, like not only our own team, the editors and the designers and the whole team, but also meet these extraordinarily talented, writers and authors and illustrators, artists, musicians, and create something from an idea, a concept. And then, you kind of stay in the game because because you're always working on new projects and you want to see them, you want to see them to their fruition and so you never ceases to surprise me how we always get excited when the first proof comes in or the finished book comes in. And I know I've published, I don't know, maybe 1,500 books,
Oh my
and I still
gosh.
get excited. And every one of them is our little book babies that we love.
Yes, I love that. And for anyone who's listening who might not be totally familiar with a publisher and what it does, could you give an overview of what you do at Barefoot Books for all of the people that you work with and support?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I think people often, when I say I'm a children's book publisher, they said, "Oh, do you write them?" No, I don't write them. Do you illustrate? No. um, we basically, the publisher's role is to put in children's publishing is to so often we start with a manuscript, and then we go out and find the right illustrator that has the right style or technique or visuals that support that. Whether it's more sort of science or nonfiction, it's maybe a different style of art. And we basically put the words and the art together, and then we design the layouts of the book and go back and forth. It's a very iterative process. And then we also obviously have to sell the books as the publishers. So we're going out to find the different markets that we're selling in, the different types of customers, and what kind of books that they're looking for, and decide how many we're going to print. And then we commit to however many, whether it's 5,000 or 10,000 copies. We make them, and then we put them in our warehouse, and then we sell them. So it's and sometimes it's a manuscript that comes to us. Sometimes it's a idea that we have for a concept that we feel there's a gap in the market, we want our gap on our list, and then we think, well, who could write that, or who's a good illustrator. Sometimes we have an amazing artist that we just love, and we think, well, what could they illustrate? And then we find someone to write it. So there's lots of different
Interesting.
ways to do it. And then we're always, we're small, we're independent, so we publish about 30 or 40 books a year, which is it's not tiny because there's some publishers that only do one or two a year, but it's not Penguin Random House or Simon and Schuster scale. And so we do a lot, also work a lot in the education market. It's become, it's a very important market to us. We're very concerned about literacy and children that may not have access to books, getting access to books. So working with organizations like Reach Out and Read, or sells through pediatricians' offices, doctors' offices, or First Book and other organizations really all over the world where it's a big substantial part of what we do.
I love that focus of just being able to have equity and access to reading, as you mentioned. And so I imagine that probably a lot of that entails building relationships with libraries. Would that be correct?
Yep, library market has always been very important to us. As I say, we started in England, and the library market wasn't as well funded, and we published as in England for the first from 1993 to 1998, and we realized that the UK market was quite small, and we were selling rights to our books to other publishers all over the world, and the US market was obviously a large English language speaking market, but it was also a melting pot of all kinds of diverse cultures. But the library market was very, very well funded in the US back in the day. And so getting our books in front of librarians, going to all the shows, the American Library Association shows, a lot of different shows at state level, is a big part of our strategy. And librarians are just a joy to work with because they love books, obviously, or they wouldn't be librarians. And so they're so appreciative of all of the love and sweat and tears that we put into making our books to make them as beautiful as they can, but also have wonderful educational content. And I think they are such a great audience because they appreciate it because they see so many books. There's so many books published and they can spot the really good ones.
Yes, absolutely. And with the manuscript specifically, I know you mentioned that one thing you look for is a gap in the market or a gap in the list that you currently have. This may be a broad question, but what do you typically look for and what makes a manuscript a good one? Like, is there anything that might stick out to you or a handful of things that you might like to keep an eye out for?
Yeah, I mean, as a small publisher, we are very sort of mission focused, and we kind of had a mission statement and a manifesto from the beginning. So we know what a barefoot book is, but we have sort of some core tenets that we publish to. I mean, early learning and literacy is obviously an important one, but also global awareness, science, tech, STEM, the environment, books about the world, the wonderfully diverse world we live in, mindfulness, and healthy bodies, healthy minds. So we sort of have social emotional learning books. So we don't do anything kind of mass markety or cartoony, and so ultimately, if it's a picture book, it's just a really good story, and with a beginning, middle, and an end. And we're always looking for really good stories, but stories that actually fit with our core publishing tenets. And then, we're always looking for amazing illustrators, but, I always advise have a look at our website and our books. And the standard of illustration is kind of closer to fine art than it is necessary to sort of anything more cartoony. So that's always advice we give is, have a look. And if you're submitting to any publisher, really do your research and understand what their ethos is, their publishing mission, and the types of books that they're doing, because publishers specialize in different things, and their market, and they publish to certain markets. So really trying to understand that, I think, is important. I think a lot of people think that publishing for children must be really easy, just because sometimes the celebrities do it and they make it look easy, but it isn't actually. It isn't that easy to write it, to create a really wonderful book that kids want to read again and again and again. And what we find almost more important is the parents or the caregivers or the teachers want to read it again and again. So
Yes.
you're almost you want a book that when a caregiver is reading a bedtime story, it's the one that they want to keep pulling out again, and they're not bored of it, or so that's key.
Yes, and you just mentioned a great piece of advice that I want to go into a little bit further, which is for any author or illustrator or whoever it might be who's kind of looking to be published. You mentioned being like looking at the different publishers' websites and seeing their missions and how that might align with the work that this individual is doing. So, for someone who's looking to get a children's book published, whether they're an author or whether they're an illustrator, what advice would you have for them in addition to what you shared?
Well, I think be passionate about your subject matter. Like if you're
Mm,
writing something that comes through, if someone is deeply knowledgeable about a subject or really passionate about their story, I think that always comes through in a manuscript. I definitely think, um, as I say, understanding who you're pitching it to and where it would fit on their list. One of the things we don't, I think people often get confused with children's books is that if you're an author, you don't have to do the art, nor do you have to find the artist. And we often get people saying, I've got the artist and I've done my whole book. And we always say, we prefer to do that because that's what that's where our expertise is. So we're usually not looking for a whole package. We're looking for either here's my wonderful art and I think it fits with your what I'm seeing, your aesthetic, even though there's lots of different artists we work with, I think it would fit really well on your list. Or this is my story, and I think it would fit in maybe your social emotional learning, or it's an authentic lived experience from a different culture. We do a lot of that. So really doing your research and also seeing you go to your local indie bookstore and see and talk to them and see what ask them. We love to get feedback saying what are you looking for, not only from bookstores but also from some of the educational organizations we work with, saying what is there a need for out there, what are you
mm.
hearing that isn't being published that you can't find. And really that's informed a lot of our publishing has been in response to what we're hearing from educators and bookstores that there isn't enough of. We've just launched a line of bilingual books it's in response to so much displacement and people moving around. There's a need for books in not just Spanish and English or even French and English, but we're launching Barefoot Bilinguals in January, which is in 8 different languages like Haitian Creole and Chinese and Brazilian Portuguese, and I'm not going to remember all the languages right now, but there's eight different languages, and that was really because we were hearing a need for that. And there's just
Yeah.
no books out there. So if I try to understand the market. I think also think is this a book that I think would sell really well in gift stores because it's often gift stores buy often because of the aesthetics more than necessarily the content, or do I think this is a great book for the library and educational market and the bookstore market? So it's slightly different um, books. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great advice. One thing that I'd love to ask you, just from what you've shared, and this question is kind of aligned with it, but what are the benefits of an author, an illustrator, or other individual looking to publish a children's book have from working with a publisher compared to self-publishing? Like, what are the differences and the benefits that they get from working with a company like Barefoot Books?
Well, I think self-publishing is wonderful that and like so many people can actually bring their books to life and in a way that you couldn't do before. Self-publishing was really a thing. I guess that the difference with working with a publisher is you're going to get much greater distribution, much wider distribution, plus more editorial expertise and help, working with an editor that can help you refine your story or your manuscript. And then the pairing, I publish children's books. We have a whole wealth of amazing illustrators that we work with. So you're more likely, and again, it's different for adult publishing where there are no illustrations, but in children's publishing, it's often hard if you go out to your friend who you think is a great artist and you put it together. It's probably going to be a harder sell than working with a publisher. But I'm a big fan of self publishing, so I think I have a good friend she's working on her second adult novel, and we were just chatting about her ability to just do her own Amazon ads and digital ads and it's quite rewarding and it might have been difficult for her to get published because it's a super competitive landscape that a lot of writers and probably not enough publishers for all those manuscripts.
Yes, and I love that too, something to keep in mind that what you shared, it's just the fact that people are even taking that step and being able to bring
Yeah.
a book into the world, whether it's children's or adult book, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
And one thing you had mentioned, going back to our previous conversation and topic, was you hinted at Barefoot Bilingual, which is coming up, which
Mhm.
sounds very exciting. And I love the work that you've done to identify a need for that. And so I'd love to hear more about anything else that Barefoot Books has coming up in the next year or exciting projects that you're working on that you'd like to share more about.
Yeah, well, we're just super excited about the publishing we're doing right now. We're still doing just absolutely beautiful stories, illustrated picture books representing different cultures, which was kind of what our mission was from the very beginning. We're doing an amazing series of really fun educational board book series. One of the most exciting initiatives we've done this year is something called Barefoot Baby Proofs, which are chew proof and washable and books you can put in the dishwasher. And we've taken sort of 8 of our best selling, what were board books, and we put them into this new format, which is great, super lightweight, and kids can, or parents can just stick it in the diaper bag and put 5 of them. They don't weigh that much, and the babies can chew on them, and they last forever. And that's just I just come back from a show where people are just loving them, an education, early childhood education show, and people are just buying them like crazy. So that's exciting. And yeah, we're doing a lot of, we're working with some really amazing artists right now and have a very exciting program for next year. One of our big initiatives is America's 250th. I don't know, I'm sure you've heard about it. Us being in Concord, it is as a children's publisher in Concord, Massachusetts. Obviously, next April is the 250th anniversary of the Revolution, the American Revolution, and so we have been aware of this coming up probably earlier than most because we're here in Concord. And so we're doing a whole list of a program of books for that, including a book called Rise Up, which is Americans protests from everything from pride to disability um, over since 1776, and that book is coming out in the spring. And we also have a really wonderful series called Our World, and it was in response to we've always been global and published books about the world we live in, but we realized we didn't have enough for little tiny babies and toddlers, and so we started the Our World series, and it's an ambitious project because each of the books, it's we have, I think, 24 in the series now, and there are a lot of countries. So we've set ourselves up for a big task. But they're written and illustrated by the author, and the artist come from those countries or have lived in those countries. So there's no pyramids to be seen in Egypt or Eiffel Tower, and it's not a tourist guide. It's a slice of life in the day of a toddler. So if you have ties to that country, or you want your child to just learn about the world, there's snippets of the languages that are spoken in those countries. And for America's 250th, we're bringing out the US and England, because obviously they were in the revolution. So those books are coming out on our list. But that's exciting. So we have quite a few different initiatives that we're always trying to think out of the box and think about what does the market need, and what has the market not thought about that it may need, and try to be pioneers. I think that we were very early pioneers of diversity, equity, inclusion books that represented every child could see themselves in a book. That's been part of our mission from the beginning. And it took a while for that to become fashionable. Like it
Yeah.
took 25 years or something. If you shows if you hang in there long enough, things come your way. But now I think there's a lot of people looking for the type of books that we publish that have representation, and that also sort of act as windows and mirrors, so you can see the world that you may not see in your everyday life, but you can also see yourself in the stories. And so that's very much kind of part of our publishing mission and vision.
And I love
And
that. And it's
yeah.
so important when you mentioned about little kids, whether it's babies, toddlers, children, being able to read. books of individuals who look like them or might be like them, and just being able to show them what they can do in the world and open them up to experiences. And so I can
Mhm.
imagine that there's probably been many instances that have been gratifying where that has happened, where a child has read a book that closely aligns with them and who they see themselves as.
Yeah, and then diversity of all types, family types, and
Yes.
abilities. And we're doing a book. We have a sing along series, which is one of our best selling, where we take the book and we set it to music, and then we create a video of it, and we put them on YouTube. So our YouTube channel has something like 500 million views.
Oh my
A lot of them,
goodness.
yeah, it has over 500 million members to our channel or subscribers to our channel. But one of the books we're doing next fall is called Everybody Move, and it's a book about all children of all different types of abilities. And it's just, again, an opportunity for a child that might have a disability to be able to see themselves in a joyful everyday life. And I think it's not meant to be issues-based books. It's meant to be books that are just like, everyday life. And I think that's super important, that we're not doing a book that is about a culture just because we're trying to make a statement about it. It's just that
Right.
we're just celebrating the diversity that is in the world.
Absolutely. I love that. And with so many exciting books and projects that you have coming up, how do you juggle and manage it all? I mean, I'm impressed just hearing about everything that you have going on and the fact that you're remembering every single one.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's when you run your own business, you're sort of I'm always once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. I think my team
True.
probably sometimes says, "Stop having ideas." If just like, can we slow down a little bit? But no, we're always we have an interesting model because we sell our books through so many different types of channels. But we've always been very like all over the world. But we've also always been very community focused, and we used
Hmm.
to have our own retail stores. We were the only children's bookstore in FAO Schwartz in New York, and we're in, you see behind me, this is our offices in Concord. They're super colorful, super fun. We open up to the public, and I think there were last Saturday there was a whole storytelling and craft activities, and a lot of open houses and author events and things. So it's fun to be able to do things that most publishers, New York publishers, wouldn't necessarily do. So
Right.
and also you get and talking to see families actually reading and enjoying your books, which is why we had our stores over the years. Is again you get direct feedback from the market on what people love and what they're looking for.
Absolutely. And I feel like books are all about bringing people together. And it sounds like you've done that, being able to create a space where the community can come and gather. And like you said, give feedback, check out the books and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, we have, and again, partly in response to the fact that sort of the multicultural emphasis and the sort of diversity and representation in our books wasn't always what the traditional market wanted. That's why we had our stores, and we started a community bookseller program, which would allow individuals, maybe new mums or dads, people wanting to sell books in their farmers markets or at their children's schools. And it's a very important part of who we are, is that, I was a mum with a 3-week old baby daughter, and I had 3 more children in 3 more years. Of course, I had 4 children under the age of 5. So
Oh
I
my
knew what
goodness.
that, and they're all now between the ages of 27 and 32. But being able to connect with other people when you've got young children, it was important, and also feel like you're doing something with a purpose. So our community bookseller program is it was obviously during the pandemic it was challenging, but we're now really trying to build it back up, and a lot of people are working in it with educators in literacy market, doing fundraisers for causes that are important to them, and so we have this opportunity to reach more communities through that program.
Absolutely. And it's great to hear all that you've done with being able to get involved in the community and, like you said, bring them back in, which leads me to one of my favorite questions I like to ask our guests, which is I'd love to hear what your favorite local businesses are to support throughout Concord and any surrounding towns.
Yeah, well, I have to say the bookstore, of course. So Concord Bookstores, in there all the time, and I love it. It's just it seems to be at the heart of Concord Center, and like right across the road is this little shop called Nestings, and it's my absolute favorite shop, probably in the whole world. It's up some stairs. There's the Main Street Cafe, and if you go up the stairs, it just has it's the most beautiful. I love my passion outside of my work is design, all things to do with design and interior design, and they've just got this beautiful shop that has just the things that you never thought you wanted and probably don't need. But it's so fun. It's so fun. Shopping in there because if you want to look for a really original gift, that's a good place to go. And then in terms of restaurants, right in West Concord, there's a restaurant called Woodsill Table. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's just so cozy and welcoming, and there's a fire, and so it's nice since it's across the road, so we can go. We often take our barefoot team there when we have guests from out of town. So those are my sort of three friend of mine thing places in the Concord area.
Amazing. I'll have to check those out. Nancy, this has been a really great episode, and I've really appreciated having the opportunity to have you come on the show. And now I would love to have you share with our listeners where they can find you and Barefoot Books online in case they'd like to learn more.
Yeah, well, we have our website, and it's www.barefootbooks.com. And so you can go there, and on our website, you can also find us on our website, but you can also find us in local bookstores and in your local library and local little children's boutiques and toy stores and gift stores. But if you want to find out about our community bookseller program, or if you're a retailer, you can set up an account also on our website. Or if you're a teacher, that we have special discounts for educators on our website as well.
Perfect. And I will link to all those places in the show notes that way our listeners can click through and learn more from there. But thank you so much again for coming on today's show.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to meet you.